Just pulling up. Finally made it. Here we are. If you guys are in the Utah area, specifically Salt Lake, I highly recommend Wild Arrow Archery. Jeremiah and his entire team, bow technicians, are not only extremely talented with getting your bow set up, but just really good guys. Give you the quick tour of Wild Arrow. So here's the different sites we were shooting. We were shooting right there. I had a 3-pin, and this last year I went to a 4-pin slider, so I can go 30, 40, 50, 60, and then slide. I'll probably do the same thing this year. It's a cool place. Come back here and shoot. Let's see if we can get this thing going. Alright guys, there she is. It's the new RX-1.
Sweet, let's do it. What's your draw length?
28.5. Will's gonna work some magic, start getting this thing set up. Here's the quiver. The rest. Okay, so what are we doing, Will?
First thing we're gonna do is change the draw length to 28.5, which would be the D position. So we just pull off this post, and then we're gonna pull this post off the back side.
Step 2 after you move the post is?
We're gonna adjust the mod, and when you're adjusting the mod, make sure it's nice and loose, but you don't want it to fall out. As you rotate it, there's a little post on the inside you can see, which indicates the draw length it's being adjusted to, and then tighten it down.
So it's set at 69 right now. I'm gonna have Will adjust it down to 65 as I get comfortable shooting it, practicing with it. These new bows are so dang fast anyways that I think it's more important to pull a weight that you're comfortable with and you can hold it back for as long as possible versus trying to like put it at, let's say, maxed out at 70 pounds where you maybe struggle, because I think it will impact your technique. The next thing he did was just check the timing of the cams. So he used the scale, and you're just trying to watch and make sure both cams are hitting at the same time. So now he's got it on the vise. Just threw the level on there.
Level's good.
And now we're gonna start putting on the rest.
Break this out, undo this cable.
So this is the rest that Hoyt makes. We have used them for the last several years. The guys at the shop here really like them. It's always a good idea, in our opinion, in their opinion, use the rest that the same manufacturer is making. There's a lot of other options out there, but you know, ultimately pick what you want.
It's nice because it comes with this spacer that you can clip into there. And that spacer will fit flush up against any Hoyt.
Again, when the manufacturers are the same, they tend to probably fit and work a little tighter and cleaner than maybe a different one that could be a universal rest for any manufacturer. Okay, now Will's tying it in. So that's just basically a little 2 pieces of felt on the top and the bottom so the arrow's quiet when you put it in there and you get it knocked. And now he's tying it in just so it doesn't come off. Got that fluorescent yellow accent color, which will match these well. I don't know if you guys have seen these before, but we've got these Hush wraps and veins. Matches pretty sweet. Okay, so next step, we are tying in the D-loop. So he started this, got the top end done. Now we got the arrow in the rest.
Now we're taking this level. We're going to take the level to the front of here, load it up to about right there so it's in line with your limb pockets. And these bows like to be just about level. Slightly knock high.
1/8 inch.
1/8 inch. Go right there. Okay, then we're going to start the back end of this D-loop. Come around, pop that through, pull this arrow out, take this cool tool, take this off, slide. You can see make it nice and tight. Okay. Next, we're gonna check your rest timing. So we're gonna cinch this up right down here in this V. There. Come through and just tie kind of a simple knot to start. We're gonna pull this bow out. Okay, we're gonna drop the rest so it's down now. Bring it over to the scale. Grab by the D loop.
What target do you recommend?
We're gonna go ahead and adjust this quite a bit actually.
Trying to get it to where the rest is synced up with the cams, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So your timing is perfect. Can make you shoot more accurate.
So they're honestly, so then I would say that something like these bad targets here is what I recommend. Like you only use practice tips with these, no broadheads. Okay. But they take thousands of hours.
Okay.
Got it? Nailed it?
Yep.
And there's a bunch of different
We decided to tie in this component. We could also tie a knot the way that this new cable configuration is, but I think this is just a little bit of a safer bet. And it adds a little touch of color.
You gotta look good.
All right, so it's been about 2 weeks. My sight is here. So I'm back at the shop with Jeremiah. We're gonna finish getting this thing set up. So what are we doing right now?
We're just going to double check the paper tune while you're here. Make sure the draw link peep sight's close. We don't have to set it fine tune yet, but then double check the paper tune, and we're going to bolt your sight on, level it up. And then once we get that set, we're going to play around with fine tuning the peep sight.
So we've been talking a lot about release aids as we're getting this new bow set up. Mine, as you can see, it's had some wear and tear. She's been around the block a little bit. And Jeremiah's sharing a lot of good insight. But I think personally, this is probably the #1 issue that archers have, particularly novice archers that haven't maybe shot a lot or haven't had any kind of formal training, is having your release too far extended. So you're basically, when you're at anchor, you're having to reach to pull the trigger. You'll hear us talk about it, and a lot of people talk about slapping the trigger. And that's definitely when you're punching it. Show them what you're talking about, the hook.
So what you want to do is, we call it the hook and pull method here. So what you want to do is shorten your release aid down. So when you put it around your wrist, if you extend your release out, you want it to come about the end of your palm as a good starting point. And the reason you want to do that is when you get to your anchor point, you want to be able to hook your finger at a 90-degree over the trigger. So if this is the trigger, you want to hook over at a 90-degree, hook over, and then you're going to actually pull through the shot to get the shot to break. And what you want to look at is at full draws, when you're here, you want your back elbow slightly above your wrist, like this. If you have too long of a release aid, your elbow will be dropped down. So on flat level ground, you still might feel comfortable and it make it easy to anchor. But on angled shots, if you have to angle down and this back elbow's too far, it's really gonna sacrifice your accuracy. So shorten your release aid down to where this hand comes forward, elbow slightly up, short enough to where you can hook that finger over your trigger at a 90-degree angle. So you hook your finger, and then to fire, you're actually going to start to pull through. So this is actually one of my hunting releases. This is a true ball Fang. And what I do with this, it's a handheld, so I hold on to it, but you actually use your thumb to fire. But I run a really heavy spring in mine. And the reason is, when I get to full draw and I get anchored, as I start to apply pressure with my thumb, I'm still pulling through the release, similar to how you would do it with an index release. But I like this because when I go to my tournament releases, like this is a Scott here, there's a couple different versions of these, my anchor point doesn't change. I can go from my hinge release to a thumb release without having to change my anchor point.
So there's a lot of different styles of releases. It doesn't really matter. Get which one's comfortable for you. But to avoid the whole trigger slapping, Jeremiah's tips are really valuable. And I think, again, that's something that I know we've all faced, myself, Casey, and Eric. I know it's a common challenge for a lot of hunters, particularly when you're in the heat of the moment and there's a deer or an elk out there. You want to make it to where you have such good form and technique that your kind of muscle memory just takes over and you're able to execute a great shot. A couple quick tips before we get this bow set up. Okay guys, here is that particular shot out of my hand. When we are setting up a bow, Jeremiah will typically shoot first, kind of verify things, and then he'll usually have us as the shooter shoot, because whether it's your grip pressure, everybody's gonna be a little bit different, so he wants to tune the bow to our hand, not just his hand. Or if you're doing it yourself, obviously you don't have to worry about someone else shooting it, but that's just barely knock right. Is that what you're saying?
Knock right, yep. We're gonna make one small slight adjustment here. So with this, you can either adjust the rest in and out, which a lot of guys at home without a boat press, that's about the only option you have. But with these Hoyts, what we're gonna do is actually twist the right cable here. And it's called yoke tuning. So, but you can over twist these, so you gotta be careful if you're kind of playing around with this at home. You can over twist these cables here. You only wanna do a little bit at a time.
So just do one full turn?
Yeah, one full turn there. And what I'm gonna do is I'm backing this out, but I'm not taking it all the way out. There's really not a whole lot of tension on that limb now. And what you wanna do, especially on the new Hoyts, if you guys looking at a new Redwrx, if you wanna take an arrow, you're gonna run it along the top cam here. And you basically kind of want this arrow to be parallel to the string. So it's hard to tell from that angle, but if you look from the top down, like so, that this arrow is in line with the string there. Every bow is a little bit different, but the Redwrx series seems to like, that's kind of like a sweet spot for their tuning. So now that I've twisted this, before this arrow was actually angled in. So the front of the arrow, the tip of the arrow was actually intersecting the string like this. So by twisting this, only thing I did is straighten out that top cam now, and then we'll see what changes through paper there. So a little bit better on the knock right, but we're slightly knock high now. So what we'll do is we're gonna actually take a half a twist out of the left yoke now.
As you guys can see, it's kind of a game of back and forth until you find the right setup that fits you as a shooter, or just in general getting the bow tuned. They come pretty dang tuned out of the box. The first two shots that I did with Will a couple weeks ago looked pretty good, but as we're kind of diving in and fine tuning it to my hand, we're just having to make a couple quick tweaks.
What can happen too is, even though you might not be haven't shot this bow a lot in the last couple weeks, brand new strings just sitting under tension, even in your bow case, they could have stretched just in, you know, minimal, but it can obviously affect the paper tune there. So.
Sure. I've got a good group going, don't I?
Yeah. Yep. So it's kind of funny. We only did a half a twist, so this shot was slightly knock high right. We took a half a twist out and we went knock high left now. By that half a twist, you can see how it changed that shot. So what I'm gonna do is take another half twist out of the right now, because we're playing around with, when you twist those cables, it affects what they call cam synchronization. So we're gonna fix those.
Chew with your salad, look.
Oh yeah.
Healthy.
Yay. Salad, broccoli. New Year's resolution, right? You see, it wasn't a lot of movement, but you can definitely tell that this tore a little bit higher up versus down, and then this one, by moving that down just a 32nd of an inch, that it fixed that knock high paper tune out of it.
Okay, so we feeling pretty good now?
Yeah, let's do. Let's throw your sight on there now, and we'll get that leveled up. So on these sights, you have 3 different mounting positions. And there's a couple of variables to look at with there. The farther you push the sight out in front of the bow, the smaller the pin appears on target. So like on these, we're running a 19 thousandths diameter pins, except for Brian's custom sight here, we got a 10 thousandths pin on the bottom. But the distance in which the sight sticks out in front of the bow will affect the pin size on target. So usually on mine, that's where I like to start, was in that farthest position out. But I get asked that all the time. There's really not a right way. And then we can cover torque tuning in the future. That's another reference of how far your sight sits in front of your bow. But for today, we're just going to start in the farthest position, run the sight as far as we can. So what we're going to do now is double check what we call first, second, and third axis on these sights. So as you can see, the bows here in the vise, I've hooked one of the Hamsky third axis levels to the sight bracket here, and I want to make sure I get a good clean flat spot, because if that angle is off at all, it's going to throw off the rest of the leveling. So this bubble here is telling me that the bow itself in the vise is level, but the next bubble down here is showing that the first axis of the sight is actually angled to the left a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is verify that the bow's level. This bubble's in the center. But I'm gonna move this block here. This is your first axis block. And what happens if you don't set this correctly, especially on a slider, as you slide your sight to longer distances, your sight is actually gonna move at an angle to the left or to the right. And that's where guys get a lot of left and right misses. So these two screw adjustments here, I'm just gonna loosen this, slide and rotate that over. And while what we're gonna make sure is that this bubble here is also in the middle here. So that tells me that my first axis is perfectly parallel and square to the riser of the bow. So I'm gonna go ahead and tighten that back down. We kind of got lucky on this sight. So this bubble in the sight, the scope, is called your second axis. And it's designed to be able to pivot and rotate. A lot of times from the factory, these are not set correctly. They just kind of slap them in there. So we got lucky that when we set the first axis, that the second axis just happened to be perfectly level. A lot of times we end up having to adjust this bubble. So, but now if you look, I got all three bubbles in line. I got the bow, which is on the sight bracket here. The first axis and the second axis are all perfectly parallel and lined up with each other. So now we'll go ahead and set third axis on here. Yeah, this new Redwrx, man, been a big fan of it so far. Hoyt made a lot of changes this year. They lowered the grip in the riser, which that allowed to have much better knock travel. So before, say like a Defiant, your grip was above center line to give the bow more of a neutral aiming. What problem it kind of created was knock travel. As you drew, the back of the knock actually would want to come up at an angle. When you change draw length, it actually would affect cam synchronization. So if you change, say if a guy's like, hey, I want to maybe try my bow a ½ inch longer, or ½ inch shorter, you always had to recheck cam synchronization, which required a bow press. Well, with this new Redwrx series, because they lowered the grip down in the riser, the neutral point, the knocking point is level. So when you change draw length on these, cam synchronization has really been a non-issue. Every time we've checked it, it's been pretty much dead on.
Little difference, they changed the whole grip itself too, even in the...
Yeah, they have this new molded grip, which I'm a big fan of. It fits my hand comfortable. Grip's kind of funny. Everyone has their own preferences there. For a lot of years, I would actually take the wooden grip off my Hoyt bow and wrap it with just what we call an overwrap tape. But this grip, man, after shooting it, I really like it. It's molded perfect. It aims really well on target. So yeah, a lot of guys have been liking that new grip. Plus, it stays a little bit warmer on those cold hunts too, which is always an advantage. So now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and set third axis. And what I want to do is set this to your hand. Depending on how you hold the bow and how you torque it this way will affect your third axis. So what I'm going to have you do, and for guys at home, we love to use these Hamsky Archery third axis levels. A really convenient tool to have to double check level, but they're about $60. A lot of guys don't have these. So kind of a quick way to do it at home is we're going to actually use your pins. Assuming that most of these sights nowadays are machined so well and square, we're going to use the pins as our vertical reference. And what we're going to use that against is our rope. And we use that as a plumb bob. So what we're going to have you do, Brian, is you're going to stand here, you're going to draw back without an arrow in it, so make sure you keep your finger definitely behind your trigger. But what you want to do is when you set here, I want you to set the bow perfectly level, okay? And then angle up as high as you can, the higher the better, using the rope as a reference. And you're going to try to keep all your pins on the rope at the same time. Once you're at full draw, the pins are on the rope, then we're going to look at the bubble. And if the bubble is to the left or to the right, then we're going to make a third axis adjustment. Level that up. And the higher you can go, the better. Make sure that all those pins are there and those pins set. Let me know when they are. Okay. So see how that bubble is way to the left there? Yeah. So that means your third axis is off. So the reason that is the way you're holding your bow, you're a little deep on your grip. So this part of your palm actually has, it's fine, you can be consistent with it and be accurate. Right. But that part of your palm pressure is what's twisting the bow. Like this, and that's why the bubble's going left. Okay. So you either can have one or two options. If you feel comfortable with your grip, you like it, leave it there. You can take that grip and move it out a little bit, and you'll watch that bubble balance out a lot better. So if you get to full draw and you come up, you can actually take that bow and twist it like this and watch that bubble dance left and right, which tells you of how you're torquing or how you're holding it. Right? Okay.
So that time is way different, yeah. It's like dead center now.
Really? Yeah, so just twist your wrist a little bit.
Oh yeah.
And see how it moves it back and forth?
Yeah.
So that's what you're fighting with third axis is you've got to have consistent grip pressure, because if you roll that bow, that'll throw that off. So what ends up happening is a lot of guys don't even check third axis.
Okay, so Jeremiah's just been talking about my grip and getting the palm of my left hand off of the grip so it sits more in the crease, right? You want to show them what you're talking about?
A lot of shooters, I'll use an arrow, it's kind of a good visual reference, but a lot of shooters have a tendency to want to draw their bow like this, and this part of your palm on that grip can cause you to torque it a lot easier. So what we recommend a lot of times to do is to actually take your hand and roll it out like so. Now, that being said, that's what works well on a Hoyt bow. If you shoot a different type of bow, they actually like different grip pressures. So if you're shooting, you know, a different model, different brand, actually you have to learn how each individual bow kind of likes the grip pressure. But the Hoyts, if you take your hand from there, roll it out, you don't want to be clear out here, that's too far. But you want to be as close to this lifeline as you can without this part of your palm touching the grip. It seems to be the optimal or the great, you know, that's where Hoyts like to be shot basically.
So I took Jeremiah's tip, I rolled my pinky out, away from my grip, and after doing the plumb level test for the third axis 3 times, the last 2 were more consistent after making that adjustment. So that tells me the third axis is actually dialed. And
so on these black gold sights, one of my favorite features about these is when you roll this sight to the top, it has a zeroing or a stopping point. And what we like to do a lot of times is zero the sight to the top where this isn't going to move. And then what we're going to do is have you dial in your pins from there. You know, if you're going to go 20, 30, 40, 50, or 30, 40, 50, 60, that's entirely up to you, whatever you feel more comfortable with. But where I see a lot of guys making mistakes, especially on their sliders, is where they're setting that bottom pin. That is the most critical pin in that scope. Because if, say, this is your 60-yard pin, and you're going to use this as your float pin to shoot past that distance, where we set that's really critical, especially in reference to the level bubble. So you see right now there's a big gap from the bubble to that pin, okay? And so what happens with that is as I'm aiming at the longer distances, if I like to get my pin as tight to that bubble as I can without interfering with my sight picture. The reason being is that those long ranges, like 100 yards when you like to practice, watching your bubble at 100 yards is super critical for accuracy. Well, if I have a big gap from my bubble to my pin, as I'm using the pin on target, I have to change my focus and look at my bubble and look back up. If I can get my pin and my bubble together, I can see my bubble with my peripheral vision a lot easier, which helps me be more accurate. The other advantage it'll give guys with a slider sight, the lower you drop your pins in your housing, the longer distance you'll be able to shoot, because your housing was going to start off a little bit higher. So if we were to take and drop that 60-yard pin down and get it closer to the bubble, you could probably get an extra 10 yards of clearance out of your sight for longer ranges, but it's also going to help you aim better on distance because you don't have to go back and forth with your focus. You can see your pin and your bubble in the same peripheral vision and more focus on the target of where you're aiming. So all these are micro adjusts, so you can loosen those, and then with these, you can see I can just twist this knob and just that pin, your bottom pin, will float down. So that's more where I would start my pins at. You can see how they're more centered in the housing now, and the bottom pin's a lot closer to that level bubble, which I still left you kind of enough gap, so if you need to fine tune that pin up or down a little bit, you have some room and space, but the pins are more centered. There's not a big gap from that bubble to your pin now. So now from there, what we'll do is we'll tighten those down, and then we're gonna work on setting your peep sight next. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna have you stand on flat level ground and make sure you're shooting at a target that's at shoulder height. I see a lot of guys, what they have a tendency to do is put the target on the ground, so as they draw, they want to drop this front arm down, and that affects your anchor point and how you're trying to set your peep sight. So target at shoulder height, you want to draw as square as possible and get to set to your comfortable anchor point, tip your nose on the string, and then what we're going to do, because this isn't tied in, we're going to adjust this peep sight up or down to your eye, okay? So we'll go ahead and have you draw back, and we'll see how close we got it here. Tip your nose on top of that string. Good. So, how does that peep sight line up there?
Pretty dang good.
Okay. So, when you look through that peep, does it line up around that green ring like you're looking through a tube?
Yeah. Okay, guys, we're just tying in the peep sight. We made a bunch of final adjustments. If you liked this video, please do us a favor. Go check out these other videos where Jeremiah has helped us set up our other Hoyt bows. But we're really excited to shoot the Hoyt Redwrx this year, and we're going to have more videos coming your way that talk more technical archery setup, tuning, tips, tactics, you name it. So do us a favor, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.